Evening, everybody.
Hello.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hey, Charlie. Hey, Sam. Hey, Ron.
Hello.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Mayor.
Hello, Mayor.
Councilmember Freudman just tried calling me, so I'm calling him back.
All right. Council Member Shaken is going to be 5 to 10 minutes late. Ms. Chang, can you just recognize when he arrives rather than having to call the roll?
To clarify, you're asking for me to recognize in the minutes his time of arrival, which yes, I would normally do that.
Right.
So during roll call, you'd like me to skip his name?
Yes.
Okay, would you like me to do the same for Al?
No, we'll call everybody. Just call everybody and we'll just, as we go along with
It gives you an opportunity to clarify to any members of the public why,
Right.
they're not here or that you'll be expecting them as well. Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I received an email from Al today saying that he's nearly done with tax season and he should be joining us in a more favorable, or shall I say, consistent basis soon.
Good. It'll be good to have him. Okay,
Yep.
it's 6:30. Are we recording yet, Ryan? Okay. Good evening, everybody. It's 6:30. This is the regular meeting of the Mansfield, special meeting of the Mansfield Town Council on April 14th, 2021. This is a budget workshop. Somebody needs to shut off their speaker, please. This is a budget workshop. There will be an opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting. Because this is a workshop, we do not take votes. It is for an information gathering opportunity. And we can ask staff all the questions that we want. So to begin, Ms. Chang, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Osberger. I see you. Berthelot. Bruder.
Here.
Frattoni.
Mr. Frattoni has been excused.
Thank you. Freudman.
Here.
Kotchenberger.
Here.
Moran.
Here.
Shurin.
Here.
Shaken.
Mr. Shaken will be a few minutes late.
Thank you.
All right, the first item on our agenda is staff reports and communications. Is there anything the staff would like to report or communicate, Mr. Aylesworth?
Just would like to pass along that we appreciate the questions and feedback we've been receiving from members of the council through the last few sessions. The questions that were posed at various times that staff committed to tracking down additional information for everybody. Those are being compiled and answers generated accordingly. And if not over the weekend, by the first part of next week, be on the lookout for sort of a synthesis list of those questions. We're going to make sure that we captured everything that everybody was looking for. But I just want to let you know that is in the works, and you will be receiving it shortly.
Thank you. So now I think if you're ready, we can go straight to the budget.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay. So tonight's discussion is going to focus on public works and a wide range of other funds. These are the corresponding page numbers in your workbooks or in your budget books. The format I plan to go through is the same as other evenings. If you have a specific question about something I say or some content on the slide, if you need me to clarify anything, please do interject and ask your question so that I can help clarify that. Otherwise, we'll kind of open it up for questions of all flavors at the end of my presentation, which shouldn't take too long. Although I think what we'll do is just as we did the last time, public works operating budget will be discussed here first. And we can pause there. John's online. John can help answer questions you have about public works, and then we'll proceed through each of the funds individually. So public works summary. Public works is both a department and a broader functional area. So there's the Department of Public Works, but as is depicted on various org charts, Public Works also kind of captures facilities management as a broader functional area. Although, as you all know, John is department head, as is Alan Corson, so they are separate departments. We'll be focusing on the Public Works department tonight, and you'll hear about facilities management tomorrow night. Overall, though, those combined departments are about 3%, 3.1% proposed budget increase year over year. The Public Works budget, again, as you saw on the previous slide, it's about $2.6 million, which represents about $93,000 increase, which is 3.7% increase in the proposed FY22 budget relative to the adopted FY21 budget. The vast majority of this, about 85–90% of it, is salary adjustments. A lot of those are contractually obligated salary increases or step increases, but also it's important to note, and I know you all know this, but just to kind of restate it, there's also a substantial uptick this year because our interim town manager, who was John, returned to his position as DPW director, and when that happened, Derek DeLay, our assistant engineer, returned to his position. He'd been serving as the interim DPW director. So basically, when that game of musical chairs happened and everybody went back to their original positions, it resulted in increased salary obligations for DPW this year next year relative to this year. Only really a couple other areas of increase in the DPW budget that are worth noting. That would be in the asphalt materials line, a $5,000 increase, or $15,000 in FY22 relative to $10,000 in FY21, and a $3,000 increase in consultant fees, $4,000 in FY22 relative to $1,000 in FY21. So with that, before we transition to the overview of other funds, happy to field any questions you have. And as I said, John is online.
Mr. Bruder, followed by Mr. Freudman.
Thank you, Mayor. And just generally, just so I know for our planning purposes, I know that with the ARP or the funds that we're expecting, is there, and one of the things I believe, if I understand correctly, is infrastructure can be allocated for those kind of funds. Are we looking, and I saw the I remember the part of the presentation, which roads we were going to do. Would it make sense at all, or has it been built in that we'll use some of those funds, or maybe try to do a little bit more paving this year? Just generally asking.
Sure. As I understand it, based on the language of the legislation, and this is where obviously it kind of starts to sound like a broken record. We're waiting on the Treasury Department guidelines to really make real determinations here. But the language in the legislation indicates that the infrastructure money, or the references to using funds for infrastructure, is limited to water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. So if that holds, it doesn't appear that infrastructure in the sense of roads, bridges, or buildings, that those would be eligible expenses at this time. So it remains to be seen for sure if that's the case, but that's our understanding right now.
What about drainage? Because I know that for us, that's a big part of what has held up some of this paving. If I'm misspeaking, John, please stop me. Type deal,
Yeah, I mean, I guess if ultimately sewer is opened up to include stormwater, storm sewer, drainage, that would be spelled out in the guidelines. My expectation right now is that drainage wouldn't be covered, but it kind of remains to be seen. I'm not sure if John has heard anything through his DPW circles that might be different than what I've heard, though.
I have not. Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate that.
You bet.
Mr. Freudman.
Yeah, I think my question was largely answered. I was looking at the, what the salary adjustments were for, and I see, never mind the DPW director or assistant engineer. I was just looking at the rest of the department, and I see it's just step increases, and that answered, there was nothing beyond step increases here for the 81,400. I'll stop here. I'll have questions after Mr. Carrington speaks, because they're more have to do with the capital improvements program. But I'd like to ask Mr. Carrington some questions about that. But it might be best to let him speak first.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions. Mr. Carrington, there's a reference in your commentary about a regional washing facility for vehicles and so on. Have you really pursued that in any depth?
No, Mayor, that's been a goal of mine for a while. Now that we finally have water and sewer at Four Corners, and I'm not doing another job, I may get the chance to finally start that, the discussion with others.
I wonder if that would be something our four-town community, the economic development group would be interested in following up on. Or
it's possible.
It sounds to me like an ideal regional project. My second question is about Maple Road. Is anything going to happen with Maple Road? We keep hearing complaints about it, and I know it's in bad shape.
Not scheduled for this year. We did submit for a grant. We're still waiting to hear on that for the complete street. It's still in the process. I think COVID delayed it a little.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Oh, I have one other question. You're proposing adding a vehicle to the fleet?
We're not there yet, Mayor, so I think we should wait till we get to Capitol.
Okay, sure. All right, those are my questions. Anybody else? Then Mr. Aylesworth, you want to move on?
Thank you. This is a quick summary of the other funds we'll be covering tonight.
Excuse me, aren't we doing the capital part of the Department of Public Works section?
The CIP discussion is at the end of this presentation. So we're going to get through all the operating funds and then CIP, which will be DPW CIP. Those slides are at the end of the presentation.
Mr. Aylesworth? out of consideration for Mr. Carrington, who stuck with us to the bitter end on Monday, could we do his capital projects and let him leave earlier?
I think John will be really disappointed to not hang around for the whole meeting, but I suppose we could change the order a bit. So if you bear with me, I will just pull up on a slide a summary of the DPW CIP requests. And John, take it away.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll still be on for some other discussion, but I appreciate it. And I didn't talk to Ryan about, in the past, we had put those two together. So first one, road resurfacing and drainage. We discussed that the other night. That's to primarily resurface Chafeeville from Mulberry up to Gurleyville, and also to do Mount Hope from Route 89, moving to the west to Wormwood Hill Road and the associated drainage. Bridges is just putting money away for future bridge work. We have done that every year since I've been here. I've actually cut that down from, it used to be a larger number. The large dump truck with plow last year, or this current year, we put half of that, the 105 towards it. This is the second half, so we'll be able to get a new truck to replace one of our older in the fleet. And I failed to mention that Derek Delay and Brian Lavoie are on the line also. If we, they're the ones who get a lot of this done, so they're also available for questions. Tree removal, this is to support contract tree removal, things that are maybe too difficult for our tree crew to handle, or also we just have so much going on, we need the help of a contractor. So this will help with more difficult trees and also for us to be more efficient. Grapple truck, council will recall last year, you authorized $85,000 for this current year to buy a grapple truck. You know, when we came to you about this time last year, that was a good number. Unfortunately, everybody's dealing with trees. We can't get a used grapple truck for $85,000 right now, so we're asking for $40,000, which I have a feeling by the time July 1st comes around, that may not be enough, because the used market is just being bought up. This is to get something with 100,000 miles on it. Still a good truck, but you know, it's not ideal. But to get $125,000 grapple truck, a new one would be about $160,000. We're trying to save the town money there, but it is, as I described last year, or Derek or Brian may have described it, it's right now we have to send out 3 people to remove all the cut down trees along the road, and this would allow us to only send 1 person to do the job, where they can pick it up with the grapple, put it in the same truck, drive it to the transfer station, unload it. Where currently we have to use a loader and 2 trucks to get rid of the wood. Mowers and attachment is for our grounds department. It's just time for 2 of their mowers and attachments to be replaced, and 2 of them do add up to $47,000 because they're commercial mowers. They cut a lot of grass, and we get a lot out of them, but the 2 we have are overdue for replacement. Guide rails is just a typical thing I've been doing every year, $50,000, and we could spend more than that, but that'll take us through at least the roads we pave that need the old wire rope to replace with a flex beam. And walkway repairs and improvements, this is to put money towards the already approved grant that we received from CROG that we're working through the design. That's to do the Huntington Lodge extension from North Eagleville down to Separate, and to do the Route 275 piece from Separate or Sycamore down to Maple. So it's just to get to our percentage required of the grant, that $40,000 is needed.
Mr. Freudman?
Yes, I believe that Mr. Carrington actually answered my questions, but I just wanted to highlight something. One of my questions was going to be about the grapple truck, because I went and checked the CIP for the current fiscal year, and ironically, it's on the same page number, $216, $85,000, and I see $40,000, and I was wondering what's going on. So you're saying the cost of the truck, you had described it last year as a used truck, so even to get a used truck, is going to cost us more like $125,000. That's more expensive than, I'll leave that. I won't make any comment on that, but anyway, you explained it, just that the grapple truck is much more expensive than we thought, even the used one. And the other one I had was about the trees, which I think you addressed, because I was concerned about that. The description of the 50,000 for trees, the narrative said it's to pay a contractor to remove trees in their stumps, and I'm reading this, and what are we getting the grapple truck for? So we could do it in-house. Maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit, but I think you did touched on that, but that kind of caused me a raised eyebrow. In-house, and we have, going to do it in-house, and we're paying contractor to do it.
Yeah, this is, and I can have Brian Lavoie, the tree warden, chime in, but this is to hire a contractor who has the capability of climbing trees to cut it. This is to cut trees down primarily. The grapple truck is to remove trees that have been cut. So it's not the tree crew, it's another crew. The tree crew, we want out cutting trees all the time. And this 50,000 is to supplement contract work for primarily tree removal and some stump removal, stump grinding. But it's just to hire a more special, I guess, a better tree expert than our current one, just someone who has a higher capability of the more difficult trees. There are some very dangerous, difficult trees. I'd rather get the best person doing it instead of, taking a chance with town crew.
Well,
Brian, you got anything?
Not to get into the weeds or into the stumps, but even when the tree is down and everything, sometimes the stumps are not something they're so big we can't do them. When we do get a grapple truck, we'll have to hire a contractor to remove them.
The grapple truck is for the cut tree. So this is the logs from the tree. The stump is still there. Most of the time, we just leave the stump in place. Sometimes, depending on its location, we have to get rid of the stump, grind it. So we would hire a different contractor to grind the stumps instead of, I could come to you and say, I need $25,000 to buy a stump grinder, but I'm not going to use it, or the department's not going to use it enough that it's worth the cost. We can hire a contractor who can do a stump for, I think the last going rate was about $80 a stump. You get a lot of stumps for $80 before you get to $25,000. Never mind the other maintenance costs. Brian, go ahead. You were going to say something?
Yeah. So David, the grapple truck would go with the tree crew. So currently we have, so as they drop the trees and we can keep them in larger pieces and put them into the truck. So it means less time taking down that tree, and we'd be much more efficient. The tree removal contractor, David, we use him for if we have to send somebody into the parks where you can't use a bucket truck, and they actually go in, they have to climb the tree and drop it from the top down. That is a specialty. That's not something that, we have a very talented tree crew, but every aspects of trees have a specialty, and climbing trees is one of them. So that's what we use that for. And there are, like John said, there are some trees that are so dangerous that I don't want to sound heartless, but I'd rather not have my guys take the chance of taking it down and getting hurt.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Mr. Osberger.
John, did I hear you say that you were going to be doing improvements to Hunting Lodge Extension?
You heard me
Adding a
say-
sidewalk?
Yeah, this has come to the council before, and you guys approved us applying for a grant through CROG. And it's to put in a sidewalk on Hunting Lodge Road extension that connects the Separatists Trailway sidewalk to North Eagleville, where there's a trail sidewalk, or Hunting Lodge continuing north on Hunting Lodge. And
And are
also,
we going to have to put a bridge across the river there?
yes, it'll be a footbridge, but yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? I have a question probably for Brian. You referred to increasing amounts of damage by ash borers. What are you seeing in town with this?
So so the ash borer has basically wiped out every ash tree in the state of Connecticut. So when you're driving down the road and you see these trees that are losing their bark, that's essentially what's happening. I'll be quite honest with you. We literally cannot keep up with it. It's happening that rapidly. Our tree crew averages on an average tree, and I'll go by an average tree being 24 inches in diameter. They're capable of taking down 3 of those trees in a day. It's just, when I took this job and became tree warden, I didn't think I was going to be as stressed as I am right now with trees. But it's part of the job. Mayor, it's really, really bad. Well, I'll just put it to you that way.
So it's worse than the damage the gypsy moths did to oaks? Well, I mean, that was seasonal, but it turned out that killed many of them. But you're saying that most of the dead trees we're seeing are not the oaks, but are instead the ash trees?
It's actually a combination of both. The problem with the ash borer, when they go into an ash tree and they go in there, they can literally destroy a tree within 3 months. The gypsy moths took a whole summer to do it. So we're you combine both of them, it's bad. But I can't say one's worse than the other right now, because they're both the same. They're both as bad. And that's in most of our time, if not all of our time, is spent taking down ash trees and oak trees that are dead. But then we have an occasional problem where we, have a windstorm and a tree will split, and we're fortunate enough to have a good enough crew that we can attack it right away. Having this tree crew was probably, if I had to say it, is probably one of the best decisions that this town has made for public works in a long time.
Thank you. At some point, I wonder if we should, Mr. Aylesworth, provide some kind of information for homeowners on dealing with this ash borer. Because I suspect that people will be dealing with trees dying on their property. I don't know whether how that would work, but just a request. Mr. Shaken?
If I may, so Mayor, I get an awful lot of calls from citizens that want me to look at the trees and are literally in their front yard, off the easement of the town, and that's going to be an issue, because a lot of these seniors don't have the money to take these trees down, and they're going to fall into the road, even though they may only be 30 feet off the edge of the road in their yard. They still can fall into the road. And I feel bad telling them there's absolutely nothing I can do. And an average tree crew that you hire will come in and take down again, we'll use 24-inch diameter as an average tree and charge these homeowners $700-800 to take them down. So.
That's cheap.
All right, this may be something for a future agenda. I'm not sure, but we can ask to think about it. Mr. Shaken, you had your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Good evening. Sorry, I was a couple minutes late. John, I wanted to talk a little bit about roads. This came up in our meeting on Monday, where you talked about public works more generally. We've upped the investment since I've been on the council by maybe 40 or 50% over the last 5 years in road resurfacing and drainage. Again, I think the question that David asked on Monday, is it enough? And I think you answered that and said you couldn't do more with the crew, with the current FTE count that you've got. But is there, is there a need that you see to given the drainage issues that you've uncovered, which has expanded the cost and time for paving, for the council to consider an even more significant investment that might include additional either staff or contractors to knock out more roads in a year? Are we getting to roads fast enough so that by the time we finish round one, the roads that we did at the beginning of it won't be below that quality score of 70 that is our sort of target.
Yeah, great question. I would say, no, we're not doing it fast enough. But there is a limit to how much I can do currently as staffed the department. So, we're asking this year, it got cut down to 1.28, and I understand the reasons why. We could probably do in-house about 1.5. If we went above that, then we'd have to look at either more staff or contracting out somebody to help with the drainage, which isn't going to be done at the same price as doing it in-house. So, we do save a lot of money doing it with in-house crew. So every dollar you spend there might be $1.50 or more using a contractor.
Thanks. That's helpful.
So, Mr. Shaken, are you raising the question of whether we ought to add to this budget item? Is this something that you want put in as a flagged item?
Yeah, why don't we flag it as just sort of a request for John and Ryan and Charmaine to show us what the maximum funding for road resurfacing and drainage we could handle without, moving more, without how much more we could handle in-house, basically. And just see what that impact on the budget would be. I'm hesitant, I think, to, during sort of constraints of budget season, have John do more significant work to sort of price out going beyond that in a single year. But that might be something we could address if the council wanted to go in the direction of a much more substantial annual investment of spending some time in the off year for next budget, sort of preparing for both a maxing out of our in-house crew and contracting for certain other roads. I'll just say it's been, John, how long have you been here? 8 years?
7 years. 7
years since we stopped chip sealing. And, you definitely can notice it now. The chip seal has, I think, mostly finally worn off of most of the roads. And so their sort of quality underneath the old chip seal has become pretty apparent and in need of significant attention, especially, I support fully the department's focus on the main thoroughfares, but a lot of the side roads and smaller roads are in pretty poor shape.
With additional funding, we could look at certain neighborhoods, roads that were built good, 30 years ago that haven't been resurfaced. We could look at some kind of sealing process, maybe not a chip seal, but a micro seal or something. But again, when the department only has 1.28 to work with, that's always something that I don't look at because I got to take care of the rebuilding the collector roads or the ones that we're working on. So that's another area I could look at for you in that flagged item.
That'd be helpful. Thanks.
Mr. Bruder, followed by Mr. Freudman.
I'm glad that we're going to flag this. I like the direction that we're going, where we try to maximize how much our crews can do this year, and then maybe look at next year, maybe beyond that. But at least for this year, making sure that we have enough so that more than just the main arteries are done. I remember when I was door knocking to even get elected, and I went on Elise Road, which is off of Codfish Falls Road, and I don't know who it was, but somebody asked me, and given what we're currently handling, I don't think a road like that would be a top priority. So yes, I'm glad that we're going to flag that.
Any further questions on this slide for Mr. Carrington or anybody on his team? Mr. Freudman, I'm sorry, I skipped you. Go right ahead.
That's okay. I'm glad this is being flagged. And I did hear Mr. Carrington say that with his current, he could handle in-house not a whole lot more than what's in there now, maybe up to 1.5. I heard that. You also know that I'm in favor of spending more if the money can be found do our roads properly before they sustain more damage, and then it becomes much more expensive. However, I want to say, and I've talked many times, this is the one area, maybe the only area where I could see spending more money. That doesn't mean I want to raise taxes. That there are many areas, I will not get into it now, I know that would not be welcome, where I think we vastly overspend or spend on things we don't have to. So I'd like to see people also think about offsets, substantial offsets to things that are, separating needs from wants, rather than just saying, oh yeah, we should do this, it's good, and this is very valid, let's just raise more money. No, let's look to save money elsewhere. There are many areas with low-hanging fruit to do that.
All right, thank you. And I think we can move on, Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you all. Okay, so building on the theme of roads that we've been discussing, a few highlights from the Town Aid Road Fund. This year's proposed budget is $608,000, and I guess I should start by saying, as you all know, but for those listening at home that maybe you're less familiar, this is a fund populated with dollars from Connecticut Department of Transportation, grant dollars that are allocated to the town on an annual basis. We use the funds in the Town Aid Road Fund for snow removal and winter roads treatment. In particular, we use it on overtime during the winter months, so salt and chemical materials and snow hauling. And this year's allocation from the state is a little over $400,000, a little over $414,000. As you all know, this came up on our a recent town council meeting. Revenues from the contract the town enters into with Region 19 for snow removal also populates this fund. In this case, the most recent contract was for about $40,000 for the year. The CIP that we just got done talking about, of the overall DPW related items, 200,000 of that number is proposed funding that would come from the Town Aid Road Fund, as opposed to the capital non-recurring fund. And so if that additional $200,000 over and above what's outlined here for overtime, salt and snow hauling is factored in, it would end up reducing the Town Aid Road Fund fund balance to about $114,000. Before I transition to the next fund, any discussion on the Town Aid Road Fund?
Mr. Carrington made a comment last couple of nights ago about the difficulty in getting the salt that he uses. Has anything become clearer on that?
Madam Mayor, we'll be able to get salt. It's just not going to be the preferred vendor that kind of got booted out of the New London Pier. So the price of salt, I expect to go way up. We've been very fortunate the last couple of years that we never got to the $225 that I budgeted. I went up to $250 this year because I expect a price increase. Therefore, that's why we could transfer the $2,000 over. But we were out a lot the last two winters, but they were mild as far as the use of chemicals. Over time, we almost spent exactly what was budgeted, but chemicals, we had some savings. So that actually has helped us out. But next year, I don't foresee any savings due to the very competitive salt distributor being pushed out of service. So I expect the price to go from $74 a ton up to probably $94 a ton.
Wow. Okay, anybody else? All right, Mr. Aylesworth, proceed.
Moving along to our sewer operating funds, of which there are two, the Yukon Sewer Fund and the Willimantic Sewer Fund. Our Yukon Sewer Fund proposed budget is just under $612,000. There are no baked-in rate increases to our customers. We are projecting level funded sewer charges from Yukon. There is an increase in the estimated pump station maintenance operating expenses. As you all know, we talked about this earlier in the week. The Four Corners sewer assessments are finally coming online, and those assessments will provide revenue for the debt service line item in this fund. More students on campus looking ahead to next year. If it's a return more to normal operations on the Yukon campus, more students on campus will result in a projected smaller percentage of expenses being passed on to the town because the university will be using the system a lot more. We're projecting an ending fund balance of just over $10,000, which is very much on the low side. It's actually less than 2% of the proposed budget, but that's been essentially artificially reduced because there's been a significant drawdown on the fund balance from the $362,000 in the current year, the FY 20/21 budget for debt service. Those payments were made on the bond before the assessments were issued. So we're going to be playing a little bit of catch up, having made those payments before the assessments were actually authorized and ultimately billed. So don't be too alarmed because that very low fund balance will be reversed pretty quickly here. Willimantic Sewer Fund proposed budget is $237,000. Similar theme of no proposed increases to rates, with a projected ending fund balance of just under $470,000, which is quite robust. John, anything you want to add?
Just that council may recall that, the Willimantic sewer, we had the worst case, if we had a catastrophic failure in 195 in front of the Eastbrook Mall, what that would cost, and that was why we needed a somewhat hefty fund balance to cover that. So that 465 is actually, I think, right where we should be. Derek Delay could maybe chime in. He's still out there.
Yep, I'm still here. No, you're absolutely right, John. It's a good fund balance to have to help address any of those catastrophic occurrences and provide for any kind of repairs and maintenance as things move forward. So we do keep adding to that fund balance as things keep moving forward, which is a good thing.
Mr. Freudman.
Yeah, thanks. I'm looking at the Yukon Sewer Fund and seeing it's coming down. It's projected to come down to $10,000 from $362,000. So we're looking at a projected loss of $352,000, if I'm reading that correctly. Now, I don't have the time right now. It wasn't. But as I recall, we also had several $100,000 drop in that fund in the current year in comparison to the year before. Is that correct? So this is like 2 years in a row of several $100,000 going down.
Navigating to that sheet now.
It should all, I'm not sure if the numbers, David, but it should be all due to the Four Corners project being completed, but we have not assessed the property owners yet. That's why if the council approves the final assessments, it'll be over 18 years instead of, it should have been over 19 years. So we lost a year. In the first year, we knew there was going to be some loss because you can't turn around the assessments as fast as when the payments are due.
I understand that. I'm just saying, am I right that this is like the second year that we've had?
I believe you are. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but
The budget book does not record the fund balance as of the end of FY 2019-2020, so that would require some further research. But I guess to the broader point, we've kind of, not prepaid, but we've made payments on the bond, and so those monies will be restored once these assessments are administered. Any other questions on the sewer operating funds?
I see none, so let's proceed.
some funds from the some highlights from the solid waste fund. This year's proposed budget, $1.45 million. We're projecting collection fees of roughly $1.25 million. That's basically the curbside program, and transfer station fees of roughly $131,000. The largest components of the solid waste budget are broken out for you there. It's the tipping fees and the contracted pickup, wages and fringe benefits. Those are the folks that work at the transfer station, and supplies and services. Projected ending fund balance of roughly $940,000. Any questions?
Questions? There seems to be a shift in recycling and also a shift in costs. I'm wondering if anybody can tell us what the impact on Mansfield budget of the rising or the falling reimbursements for recyclings and increased costs for this. And also, my other question is, does the closure of the incinerator in Hartford make any difference to us?
I don't believe the closure of the incinerator in Hartford impacts us. John, correct me if I'm wrong, was it New London where our solid waste goes?
It goes down to Preston through Willimantic Waste, and we're under contract, so our tipping fee is locked in. But the next contract, Mayor, it probably will have some impact based to the Hartford closure, because one less incinerator plant, there'll be more competition, more trash to go to less places. So we probably pay a hefty tipping fee the next time we come up for a bid.
And unfortunately, the market for recyclables, because of changes in global markets, right now there's no money in it, and it's just about managing the actual cost to the town.
And that's where having a hefty fund balance will be able to, if we see a huge spike in that tipping in a future contract, we may be able to offset it with some fund balance, so we don't pass that entirely on to the customer, with a shock. We can gradually get there.
Right. Okay. I have a feeling that this is going to be something that we're going to really have to deal with in the future. Am I right or wrong?
I think you're absolutely right. I think municipalities everywhere are sweating their solid waste contracts in a big way. Those that have seen theirs come back open in the last year, I think have really had to stomach some major changes that were not in their favor. And to John's point, we're going to enjoy, I think, some good years based on what we have left in the contract, but we have to brace ourselves for a new reality.
And also, this is where the pay-as-you-throw helps out, where, towns that have it in their tax base, they have to find that in taxes. We as consumers can, recycle, compost, and all that to get our trash down, because, each Mansfield resident has to pay that price. So if they want to save money, they have to learn how to do other things. If they want to be lazy and not recycle and not compost, they're going to pay a heftier fee.
Well, I have a feeling that's another thing we're going to have to be dealing with over the next year or two. So
you are correct.
All right.
Looks like Mr. Freudman has a question.
I'm sorry, Mr. Freudman. You're on the far right of my screen, so I don't always see your hand. Go right ahead.
Oh, I'll wave. Okay. I know this is maybe crying over spilled milk, but I remember this came up last year, and there wasn't a great concern about the fund balance in the solid waste fund, but I was concerned that we were taking money out of this fund that we're now concerned about because of rising tipping fees, etc. And we took out $50,000 for the new swap shop, and I remember I was concerned about it, didn't think that was a core need of the town, and now here we are a year later, we're worried about that fund. I'm just saying this. We took money out of that fund for the swap shop.
I wasn't worried about it, David. I was just saying that we had a good fund balance. So if in the future. I'm just not worried about the fund balance.
I think the worry,
one of the things the swap shop does is reduce the amount of garbage that we have to pay for.
Well,
So
that's arguable. Some people might look at it as a glorified, garage sale that people could have as they used to in their own, their own neighborhoods,
some people can. Mr. Aylesworth, where do we go from here?
from here, we are going to the Transit Services Fund. Transit Services is a compilation of the, budgets for the Nash Zimmer Transportation Center and our WRTD programs. This year, the Nash Zimmer Transportation Center budget is $31,300. And those funds primarily are a reflection of what we pay for cleaning services and supplies. It also is worth pointing out, and I think we mentioned this when we presented the library budget in recent days, but the staffing and programming costs for the Library Express desk attendance has been moved to the library budget in the general fund. It used to be housed in the Transit Services Fund, and so that has been since moved out and more appropriately put in the library budget because there's a library function that's being provided. This year's proposed budget for WRTD programs, $136,000, and that reflects funding for Dial-A-Ride, our fixed routes, which include Storrs to Willimantic, which I believe had 60,000 or about 60,000 riders this past year, as well as Hunting Lodge, 28,000 riders. Also includes funding for ADA transport and fare free, which is also called the prepaid fare. Projected ending fund balance in the Transit Services Fund of about $25,000, which is about 15% of the overall budget, which is a pretty healthy range for the Transit Services Fund balance. Any questions?
Questions? Ms. Strasburger. You're muted, Charlie.
I see here on the Nash Zimmer Transportation Center, primary cleaning services and supply. Is that a service that we're paying for, or is that just supplies?
That's correct. There's a cleaning contract. There has been discussion. Thus far, no changes have been made. There's ongoing discussion about the possibility of our facilities department taking on cleaning responsibilities there. Longer term, there might be more bandwidth for that when when 2 of the 3 elementary schools are closed. That should, we believe, free up some staff time. It might be a bit premature to make that change now before that transition happens, but we have been discussing it, and I think longer term there's a higher likelihood that may happen. But for right now, we're budgeting for the cleaning contract. That doesn't mean that we can't shift gears during next budget year, but we are carrying funds in this budget for a cleaning contract, which is what we've been doing, I believe, since Nash Zimmer opened.
Very good, thank you.
Questions? One of the issues about WRTD has been quality of service. Have we been satisfied with what's been happening?
What I'll say is we had I thought, a productive phone conversation in the last couple of weeks with the new executive director and their new senior planner. They seem really interested in having a dialogue with the town and getting feedback on how their services can be improved. They're aware of a number of the criticisms, basically based on historic performance. And we talked about, they were aware that the budget season is kind of all consuming for the town council. And so we were actually looking ahead in the calendar for a little later in the spring to have folks from WRTD come and talk with the council directly and invite other stakeholders to that discussion. So I'm heartened by the fact that they seem eager to have those discussions, Mayor. And members of their board have also reached out to me, and I'll actually be meeting with them in the coming days as well. So I don't think any organization is perfect, but I think based on what I see happening and the outreach going on in more recent times, I think that's pretty encouraging.
Okay, we do have a person on their board. Do we need further appointments?
I would have to research that further. I'm not sure of the status.
Okay. Any other questions regarding the Transit Services Fund? Mr. Carrington?
I believe we have our 2 members, Mayor, unless something's happened since I left the interim status. We have Caitlin Epling and Will Beagle.
Ah, okay.
And I believe Will Beagle, now that John just reminded me that Caitlin also serves on the board, I can confirm this, that we do have 2 because I'm meeting Mr. Beagle next week.
Good. All right, anything else? All right, this has been a contentious one in the past, so I'm hoping things are smoother than they were. Moving on.
Some highlights of our debt service fund budget. Proposed budget is $955,000. This includes monies that are transferred in from the general fund in the amount of $730,000. I believe you saw that transfer reflected in a debt service graphic from my first night's presentation. Also includes a transfer in from the sewer operating fund of $244,000. And again, that's a portion of the 2019 sewer project to be paid from assessments. Of our debt service principal or payment on principal, $585,000 and about $270,000 towards interest. We're carrying some money in the budget for costs associated with the issuance of new debt. As you all know, we're in the process of bidding out both the new elementary school construction project and the middle school roof and roof mounted photovoltaic project. And so the bonding for those projects and the debt service, there are administrative costs associated with making those monies available. And so we're carrying some money in the budget for that. Projecting ending fund balance of about $21,000 in the debt service fund. And I believe there's a breakout. I couldn't quote you which page off the top of my head, but there's a breakout of all the existing debt that's still on the books in your book. It's somewhere in the range of page 248 to 257, as the slide says. But any questions on the debt service fund?
Any questions? Mr. Freudman?
Yes, thanks. It's not a question really. It's more of a comment. As you said, these pages, it's actually more like pages 250 and 251, these projections. When I look at the expenditures, say on page 250, yeah, I mean, they're in the 700,000 or 800,000 range projected for years, but that's not taking into account the new school, new elementary school and the new roof with solar panels. You know, I can roughly project that number on the total expenditures by 24-25 it could be more like $2.7 million. So I mean, let's understand what we're seeing here is just the bonds that are outstanding now, but we know there are others in the works. They've been approved, and those will be the real numbers for total expenditures, more like 2.7 million in 4 years from now. That's all.
Your point's well taken, David, and your point is accurate that it does not reflect those projects that have yet to be bid out. And once those projects are factored in, the projected debt service for what I'll call out years would be substantially higher. You're correct.
Okay, any questions on debt service? All right, proceed.
Highlights from the health insurance fund, proposed budget of just under $9.6 million. Ours is a internal service fund. We have a self-insured pool of employees from the town, Mansfield Public Schools, and Region 19. And these benefits are provided to employees and some retirees. As we talked about, I think a couple times now, previous meetings, the average premium increase across the entire plan is slightly greater than 16%. The town's total expense is up just under 27%. It's up more than the 16% because it factors in things such as when we create new positions and there are benefit plans associated with that. We're adding whole new plans that we didn't have on the books before. An employee has a change in a life event and their plan goes from, say, a single plan to a family plan. These are all things that increase our expense in terms of the town's contribution towards the health insurance. The budget proposes use of a little over $900,000 in available fund balance to avoid passing on the full increase in premiums to employees. I believe it would leave the increase at somewhere around 8% as opposed to, again, that 16%. So it really cuts the increase in half and shares that pain, if you will. The projected fund balance, even with the use, though, of that $914,000, is just under $3.7 million. And for our purposes, a fully funded balance is a little over $2 million. So we're still in a very healthy range as a percentage of the overall operating budget that we have in fund balance.
Any questions on the health insurance fund highlights? We did have some discussion on this at a prior meeting having to do with the size of the increase in costs coming from our care, assuming that there will be an increase in cost due to COVID, and we are hoping that this might be one of the uses of the ARP funding because it is a COVID-related expense. So we're hoping to offset some of that in the future, but that's still very hypothetical. Mr. Konchenberger.
Thank you. I mean, that was, you just answered part of the question. So just to confirm that the projected end-in fund balance includes is after the $914,000 is used to offset the premium increases to our employees, and also, of course, takes into account actuarially the potential for increased, medical costs or the likelihood of increased medical costs due to COVID. So this is all put into that, and then when that's done, we project a 3.688 balance.
I am 99 and change % confident that is the case, but Charmaine is on the line and she can tell me if I have that wrong.
Charmaine, is it right? Wrong?
I just want to make sure I'm following exactly what Mr. Konchenberger just indicated.
I just that the last bullet point, the projected end-in fund balance, I just want to make sure that it takes into account both the $914,000 that we'll use to offset the full increase in employee health insurance premiums, and also it takes into account the actuarial projections on what our employee health costs will actually be next year, taking into account COVID.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Charmaine.
All right, are we ready to move on?
Okay. Highlights from the Workers' Compensation Insurance Fund. Proposed budget is just under $469,000. This is an internal service fund used to make payments for workers' comp insurance premiums for the town and Mansfield Public Schools. We currently purchase our workers' comp insurance from KERMA. The goal of participating in the insurance pool is to control swings in premium costs. We realized roughly $15,000 savings in the current budget year due to negotiating a combined contract between the town and Mansfield Public Schools. And there's a projected ending fund balance of just under $137,000, which is about 30% of the overall proposed budget. And again, that would be a healthy fund balance range.
Are there any questions on the workers' comp fund? Hearing none, move on.
Our cemetery fund, proposed budget of $31,500. Expenditures are primarily in the area of cemetery maintenance and mowing costs. There's a part-time salary for our cemetery sexton. Estimated ending fund balance of just under $300,000.
Did we get a grant to repair some of the old stones? I think we applied for one.
That would have likely predated me, so I don't know if John or others are familiar.
I can speak to that, Ryan. This is Sarah Ann. Yes, we applied for and received through the Neglected Cemeteries Grant Program approximately I believe it was $2,500 or $2,600 to do some repair work.
Good. And does that show in the budget anywhere?
I believe if it shows, it would be perhaps an offsetting expense. We may have had to budget a bit more in this year's operating budget, but I don't think I have that answer at my fingertips. I would have to research it a little bit more for you, Mayor.
It's not a big deal. I was just curious. All right, move on.
Okay, now we're done talking about other funds. We'll talk about contributions to other organizations that we partner with. Primarily, we're talking about Eastern Highlands Health District and the Mansfield Downtown Partnership. This shows their respective budgets, a 3% increase in the overall budget for Eastern Highlands Health District, and a slightly over 1% decrease in the Mansfield Downtown Partnership annual operating budget. Highlights from the Health District. As I said, the proposed budget is $910,000. The budget was adopted by the EHHD Board of Directors back in January. Member town contributions reflect an increase in the per capita rate and population estimates, and Mansfield's contribution in the coming budget year would be $150,120. And I actually want to point out, we had this a little bit off in a slide that you all saw, I think the first night I presented, so I just want to clarify that now. I believe that slide showed our contribution level at $148,000 and change, and the correct number is just over $150,000. So an $1,800 increase from the current budget year. And again, that's a reflection of per capita rates and increases in per capita rates that are affecting all the member towns and the latest population data.
Eastern Highlands has made a huge contribution to this town and all of its member towns during this pandemic, and they have done immense amounts of work for a very small staff and a very small organization. Every time they've held a testing event or a vaccination event, we have heard that it is well run, well managed, friendly, welcoming, and they've done a really good job. So this is one contribution that we should not begrudge in the least. So any questions, Mr. Freudman? I know you have had longstanding concerns about the way we are charged for this fund.
You're muted.
Mayor, you are not only wise as always, but you are prescient. But I will say this because I have to get it off my chest. You know, we're paying roughly a third. The ratio stays about the same, close to a third of the total charge of the 10-member towns, and that's because 12,500 students on campus are counted, and it's an area, an enclave, over which the Eastern Highland Health District has no jurisdiction. And there's two things I want to say about this. First of all, it may very well be that you're supposed to look at the U.S. Census, but everything in life is negotiable, including that. You know, an arrangement could be made with the other 9 towns. This just isn't fair to count so many people where it's an enclave that we don't have any say over, collect no fees over, their dining halls, their water, their sewer, all the things that help sustain the district beyond what they charge the towns. And the other thing I want to say, and I will, you know, to the extent that I'm on the have an opportunity to speak publicly and I'm on the council, this is something that should rankle everybody for the next decade. Because UConn, on March 17th of last year, during spring break, 2020, they essentially expelled all the students from the dorms. It's a strong word to use, but it wasn't like you're on vacation or you can't move in for a couple of weeks because of COVID. They decided you're out, you're closed. You're going to have to make an appointment to come and get your stuff. You no longer live here. And the universities across the land were given the option. They weren't required to, and not all of them did, but they were told you may count those students as if they were still living there, but they didn't have to, and they chose to. Now, if they had not counted those students, we would be 20% of the population census of the 10 towns. So at least for the next 10 years, we're paying $50,000 or $60,000 per year more. And this is, you know my thing with UConn, but they don't take the town's interest into consideration. This is an area, one of many examples. This was no skin off their nose. It would have made no difference to them one way or the other. And this is going to cost us for 10 years, well over $600,000. Just saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the Eastern Highlands Health District budget?
I might just say, and I appreciate, understand the point that Mr. Freudman's making. It's a discussion that I'm sure has been had with Rob and the board in the past, and I'm happy as the new town manager to revisit those conversations, or certainly make sure that it's visited for the first time if it hasn't been touched on before. I do think, I would be a little remiss though not to point out that while in this case the point he's making, Mr. Freudman's making, is accurate. If the health district used a number, say, closer to 9,500 people or 10,000 people as opposed to 25 or 26,000, that would have the effect of reducing our dues and transferring some of that cost to the other member towns. Definitely am not disputing that basic premise. But there are other ways, and this is where I think, again, just being pragmatic, kind of taking the good with maybe the not so good, that we have to remember that we benefit from the way our population is calculated in the census in other ways. The rescue plan funds that we stand to receive, $7.5 million, as most recently reported, is based on our census of 25 or 26,000 people. And we would be receiving, millions less if that number was based on a population of 10,000. So I think it's one of those things that, again, it doesn't always work in our favor, but then it can also work in our favor in other ways. And the universe may have a way of kind of balancing itself out. Just another thought, I guess.
Thank you. Other comments on Eastern Highlands? Mr. Shaken.
Hi. I would just sort of piggyback on what Ryan said and make several comments. First, to agree wholeheartedly with Ryan's point that our population numbers here that include UConn that are counted by the United States Census have always included UConn as counted by the United States Census. And, this quibble here over what is $150,000 of taxpayer money to fund a regional health district, which is a good thing that we ought to do instead of having our own, which many municipalities do. It's a great way to save significant money compared to having our own health district. Is absolute pennies compared to how our census count of 26,000 affects the town's revenue from a state perspective, from a federal perspective, and also our ability to qualify as an opportunity zone. I mean, the list is long. It is, I would imagine, most poignant right now, given that Mansfield is set to receive, as Ryan said, millions from the American Rescue Plan. And I want to make the point that $7.5 million is the total number, but a really substantial portion of that fund is the allocation that we received because of our presence in Tolland County and the lack of county government in Connecticut. All the towns in Connecticut are receiving a portion directly of the funding that would have otherwise gone to a county government had Connecticut used that form of government. If Mansfield had 11,000 people as its census population, instead of 26,000, we would be receiving millions of dollars less from that particular allocation in the American Rescue Plan. Secondly, I want to just dispute a point of fact that Mr. Freudman made. He is incorrect that the United States Census gave the University of Connecticut the choice of how to count their students. The census advised universities, most of whom had sent their students home, all of whom I think had sent their students home due to COVID last year, that student populations, which are counted as institutional populations, so they're counted differently than you or I, they're not sent a survey, should be counted at their quote unquote usual residence on April 1st, 2020, where they live and sleep most of the time. And the way that UConn treated the students then was to count them as part of their institutional population, even though they had been sent home due to COVID. It's how universities everywhere in the country treated their students. And unless Mr. Freudman can show me where I'm wrong, I do not believe that he is correct, that UConn had a choice to not count their students as part of an institutional population during last year's census.
Mr. Freudman, followed by Mr. Katzenberger, and I would like to point out that we are getting on to 8, and it would be really nice to finish this up on time tonight.
I'd like to say in response to what Mr. Shakin said, you all recall this woman came to the council well ahead of the census. So she was trying to get the various towns to form a committee to get out, in order to help get better participation in the census. And so she was like a point of contact for us on the census. And I called her after census day and had learned that UConn had counted, and she very explicitly told me that the Commerce Department at the highest levels had passed the word on that universities had the choice. They could count them, she said, as if the students were still living there, even though they had told them all to leave, or not to. So, I got that from her. I don't know that she would have made it up. She said it wasn't a requirement because that's what they usually have. They really did. She explained it to me explicitly that they did have the option. Now, okay, that's I'll stop.
Mayor,
Mr. Shakin.
I'm reading from a statement from the United States Census Bureau issued on March 15th, 2020, that says, in general, students in colleges and universities temporarily closed due to the COVID-19 virus will still be counted as part of this process. Even if they are home on census day, April 1st, they should be counted according to the residence criteria, which states they should be counted where they live and sleep most of the time, which means that they were counted correctly by the university as they were by every other university in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on from the census. This is not relevant to the budget tonight. We are bound by these agreements and by this law. And so this is not something which we can debate, although I understand Mr. Freudman's position. Next item, please.
Mayor, I just wanted to point out, I think Mr. Katzenberger had his hand up. I don't know.
Oh, thank you. Just, I agree with Ben Shakin's comments, but and also to point out another, I think, significant advantage is that by having a regional health district like this with multiple towns participating, we can have a larger and more sophisticated health district, one able to provide services that would not be available to us or to our neighboring towns, presumably, without that. And as you noted a few minutes ago, the benefits of having such an excellent health district has been highlighted this year. Size allows, growth in size and allows greater, more and better services.
If this has something to do with the amount of money in the budget which we are giving out, I will entertain the question, but not otherwise. Mr. Freudman?
Indirectly, it does. And just one sentence. I was not, to Mr. Katzenberger's point, I'm not arguing against the health district, which is kind of what your comment made it sound like. I'm just saying we didn't have to pay we shouldn't have to pay as much, and we didn't have to had some other decision made.
Thank you. I'm very much aware of your position, as are other members of the council. Next item, please.
The final item for tonight's discussion as far as the operating budget is the downtown partnership. Again, you saw on the summary slide, this year's proposed budget for the partnership is just under $350,000. The lion's share of the partnership's budget comes from contributions made by the town of Mansfield and the University of Connecticut. Each have been contributing $150,000 for a few years now. And that contribution is level funded this year, so no increase in our contribution. We do have an additional side, arrangement, if you will, where we pay the partnership $40,000 for economic development services. So that's additional time and capacity that that Cynthia provides the town, direct service to the town and Town Mansfield's economic development. That while these things are intertwined, is sort of above and beyond what is the aim of the downtown partnership. Member fees for those members and businesses that belong to the partnership are $10,000. The organization's projected fund balance is $350,000, which is about 1 full year of its annual operating budget. And the board adopted its current budget April 1st of this year. Any questions?
I will point out that the board is about to engage in a strategic planning exercise, and one part of that plan is to look for some additional sources of funding besides the town and the university, because as our responsibilities, or as the partnership's responsibilities have expanded, its resources have not. So there will be some work done on this in the future. Any questions on the downtown partnership? Then let's move on. The next item on our agenda is a discussion of proposed budget and council questions. Does anybody have something to add at this point? Question or a request or, okay, is there a hand somewhere? The next item is public comment. Do we have any members of the public wishing to comment, Mr. Aylesworth?
I don't believe so, Mayor. I was not made aware of any member of the public looking to comment tonight.
All right. You see our upcoming budget dates on the screen. In addition, on April 19th, there will be a public information session that will be virtual, as this one is, but that one will, the town manager will present his budget in full, or in summary, and members of the public will have an opportunity to ask questions at that point. In addition, each of these workshop sessions will conclude with an opportunity for public questioning. We have put the public discussion at the end of the workshops so that people have an opportunity to hear what we've discussed before they make their comments. I would also like to notice that these budget dates
have changed since Monday.
have changed because we have extended our deliberation time by almost a full month in order to give us opportunities to understand what the federal resources are going to mean for the town's budget, and also to understand the state's responses to those, the state's response and our regular state funding. So, there are the new dates. May 24th would be hopefully our adoption prior to our regular meeting. And if we can't do it, we'll do it again on the 26th. So with that, there isn't anything left on our agenda except a motion to adjourn. Does somebody wish to make such a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Shaken. I heard somebody seconded Mr. Bruder. Thank you, one and all. And there's a lot here to digest. Please read the budget book and prepare for our next presentation. And we will see you tomorrow night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.